So what I want to spend a bit of time about, and I think actually this ties in quite really nicely with what Michelle was doing, but it talks a little bit about, I want to spend a bit of time thinking about how we can create a laser-like focus on who are our ideal clients. Because once we know really and truly who our ideal clients are, bless you, it's much easier to go and find them. And it's also much easier to identify the people that really aren't our ideal clients and say, look, actually, I need to spend my time working on these types of people on these. Now, I'm not saying necessarily that when you meet somebody that isn't your ideal client, you don't take them on as a client. But sometimes that will be the case. Obviously, you need to decide if it's a profitable client, that it isn't. For example, geography. You might say, like, if a client's willing to drive down from Scotland to see me, that's great. It's a good fit for me as long as it matches the other criteria. Would I market to people in Scotland? No. So when you've got to identify what clearly are your ideal clients, and really what we're trying to do is think about what is the smallest niche that we can actually identify as our ideal clients. Now, I wasn't going to talk about this today, and then something that one of you guys said in your What's Working and What's Not reminded me of it, and it's actually a brilliant example of finding the ideal client, and that is a guy called Paddy Lund. I don't know, has anybody heard of Paddy Lund? So Paddy Lund was an Australian dentist, and when Sir Clive Woodward first took over the England rugby team, he gave a Paddy Lund book, Australian dentist's book, to every member of the England rugby team. And when asked years later, after they won the World Cup, what Sir Clive Woodward did and why was his created so much success, one of the rugby players, and I can't remember who it was, but it was somebody that it was like a prop, somebody you were like, it's going to be, it's not the answer you would expect. But one of them said, it was them giving me that Paddy Lund book that had the greatest impact on everything he did as our coach of England rugby team. I've read one of his books quite a long time ago, but the reason that it's a really powerful message is and it ties in quite nicely with what Michelle was talking about. In Australia at the time, the mental health of dentists was appalling, to the point where the suicide rate across any sector was highest in dentists. Basically, in Australia, they were running themselves into the ground and they were repeatedly taking their own lives because they were so miserable. And Paddy Lund found himself stood on Sydney Harbour Bridge, ready to jump off and end his life because of the stress that his practice was putting him under. And he had a bit of a realization. And what he decided was he was going back to his practice and he was going to write a letter and send it to every one of his clients. Basically, he wrote this letter saying, I've just come back from Sydney Harbour Bridge. I was about to take my own life, realized I needed to change my business. And to 95% of his clients, he said the letter finished off with saying, so here ends our service to you. Here's a list of all the other dentists in Australia. Please find a dentist that is right for you, but we will no longer be offering you a service. 5% of his clients got a different letter that said, you are in the reason why you are our ideal client and who we want to work with is because of this, and we want to continue to look after you. And it not only transformed his business, he goes on to create, it's a great book if you want to think about some of the stuff that Michelle was talking about in terms of the environment. How do we create an amazing front stage to our business, i.e. the bits that the client sees? So for example, when you go into Paddy Lund's dentistry practice, you have a client relationship manager. That person is the person that kind of liaises with you, makes you feel welcome, makes you a cup of really good coffee from some massively expensive Italian coffee machine he had brought in. They're the people that kind of say, how are you doing? All the small talk stuff, and manage you going in to see the dentist, make sure you're okay when you come out of seeing the dentist, make sure that all the appointments are booked in, but also then sends you on your way with what they call dental buns, which are basically sugar-free donuts. So everyone leaves the dentist going, oh, these are amazing, and they're actually good for my teeth, or at least not bad for my teeth, probably not necessarily good. But it's a really good book to read. But it also makes you think about, he clearly defined what was his ideal client. And he was like, he was willing to, I mean, he didn't sell that 95%. You know, most of the people in this room would go, hang on, if I'm getting rid of 95% of my clients, I can sell those clients and that can pay me quite handsomely. And now I can enjoy working on the 5%. But it's a really interesting thought process as to how extreme you might go to. And Paddy Lund, as a result of that, became phenomenally successful. He's a globally recognized speaker as well as author, because of that change that he made on Sydney Harbour Bridge. So when we're thinking about our marketing and thinking about our ideal clients, it's useful to kind of reference how we should be marketing. And I've shared with you in a previous workshop about how we defined what was our phenomenal process. And this is kind of like the shortened version of it. So the exploration process led on to the efficient financial plan, which led on to the planning meeting, which led on to the progressive review program. But how did we pile in clients and ideal clients to that? Well, we had a whole series of different attraction marketing devices. So attraction marketing devices are anything that essentially we give away for little or nothing. So all of my books are attraction marketing devices. We could give those away and they would drive people into the next process. We could do seminars, we could do webinars, we could do all sorts of different things that those attraction marketing devices would drop into. But we've also in these workshops talked about how we can build collaborative partnerships. Again, very much linking into what Michelle talked about. So those partnerships would also drop clients in, as would referrals. So those attraction marketing devices are really powerful in the sense that, you know, if you're speaking on a radio interview or you're speaking to a potential accountant or whatever it is that can introduce clients to you, you've got lots of tools available to you in your armory to go, here you go, here is something I can give you for free that now will allow you to drive those clients in. And whether that's, you know, reading a book and going, I'm going to pick up the phone and see these guys, whether it's watching an online video that then drives them into a sequence of emails, and then when they get the right email at the right time for them, they go, right, I'm now going to contact that company. The reason I share this with you as a starting point is this type of marketing only works if you've got a clearly defined understanding of who your ideal clients are. And it's not everyone that owns a business, or it really is. It's not even every financial advisor. If you look after financial advisors, you've got to be really clear on what it is that what does that ideal client look like, because otherwise you end up with really generic marketing, really generic messages that aren't actually right for anyone specifically. So that's where I want to start. I also want to touch on something that Andy Harrington, one of the previous guest speakers, touched on, which I think is a really important concept when we're talking about ideal clients, and that is what advertising looks like today. So historically, you might have said, all right, okay, I want to advertise my business. I'm going to pay a huge amount of money to ITV and I'm going to advertise on TV. And I'm going to pay a fortune to advertise to millions and millions of people, 99.9% of which are not my ideal client. The same with radio. You'd pay for a radio ad and you're broadcasting. We just got contacted by Rutland Radio to see if we would like to advertise the trusted team on Rutland Radio. Right? Of all the people in Rutland, there is not that many. I mean, there's a few, good number, but percentage-wise, we're talking very few that are our ideal client for the trusted team. And the same with the newspaper. We could put an advert in the Daily Telegraph or the Times, and it'd be like, right, okay, this is a good concept for us, but we're spending a fortune to reach lots and lots of people that aren't our ideal client. In today's world of advertising, we don't need to advertise. We don't, it used to cost a fortune to advertise on TV, but now we can have our own TV channel for free. We can put our own TV channel out there for free, which gives us incredible ability to market. We can have our own I have my own radio station or radio channel, or we have it because Claire is my co-host for the Triathlon podcast. So we can be really specific about podcasting. And one of the speakers I'm lining up for next year is somebody that can teach us all how you can promote your business through the medium of podcasting. But essentially, you've got your own radio station for free or for very little that can be targeting the ideal clients that you want to attract. And then when it comes to the news, instead of paying for a fortune to put an ad in the Daily Telegraph or the Times, you've got exactly the same type of reach through social media, but way more targeted, so much more targeted. And this is why we really need to narrow down what our ideal clients are. And it might be that you've got several ideal clients. So I worked out over time that we had 3 ideal clients at Efficient Portfolio. And the best way I can describe those 3 ideal clients are people with a reasonable amount of wealth that are in the lead up to retirement. They've got retirement on the horizon, and they're now starting to worry about what retirement looks like from a financial point of view. Am I going to have enough money in retirement? Am I going to run out of money if I retire at set date? Can I afford to retire at set date? If I retire at set date, what does that look like? There's all of those thoughts going through their head. So I know that in the people in the 5 to 10 years and lead up to retirement, that's the thoughts they're thinking. So that's ideal client number 1. Ideal client number 2 is the people that are probably around 5 years post-retirement, and they're now starting to think, I've got my head around the retirement thing. Now I'm starting to worry about inheritance tax and how I leave a legacy, how I leave what I don't spend tax efficiently to the next generation. Ideal client number 2. Ideal client number 3 is entrepreneurs. Successful entrepreneurs, they're making good money, but they're too busy to spend their time understanding how to deal with their money. So they tend to be pretty unorganized when it comes to their finances, and yet they have more opportunities than employed people to manage their finances. So those were our 3 ideal clients. We had a 4th future ideal client, and that was successful young professionals. So every time we were creating any attraction marketing device, we were targeting one of those 3 ideal clients, or occasionally we were thinking about the long-term future of the business, and we created an attraction marketing device for clients that might be the right clients 10 years from now. And the perfect example of that is books. We had a book that was, if you're thinking about retirement and it's like, oh my God, it's coming over the horizon, and you see a book called The Dream Retirement, you're like, right, I need to read that. Or I'm 5 years beyond retirement, I'm starting to think about leaving a legacy. The Life Legacy Gift is the right book. Entrepreneurial Happiness is like, my experience is that business owners didn't want to deal, they don't have time to deal with their finances. They have more time to deal with getting their business better. So I wrote a book that was about how they could improve their business and their work-life balance, which is what they wanted, but within that was the financial piece that they needed. And then we had the Smart Money, which was for people at the start of their financial planning journey, teaching about the principles of money, and that was to get people that were going to be our future clients kind of on board. And once you've defined those ideal clients, you can be really specific about how you target them. And you can put lots of different attraction marketing devices out there, all of which are trying to pull in those same people. So for those retirement clients, we've obviously got the book, which I'd mentioned. We had the Dream Retirement Dinner. So sometimes that would be in a really lovely hotel like Stratford Park or Hamilton Hall, and people would buy them a really lovely dinner, and that would be segued by my speaking. Sometimes we did it here and we brought in an amazing chef. So the dinner was a really lovely way of just bringing in, and we could put that out there in people that were on our email list would get an invite to that we knew would come from the right ideal client mechanism. We could share that with accountants and solicitors so that they could invite their clients. We could share that with our clients, our existing clients, so that they could share that with their friends. Look, you're thinking about retirement. Why don't you go and have this lovely dinner with Charlie and his gang, and you'll learn something as well as, get a lovely dinner. We created a digital tool, which Nitesh created for us, which was the 2-minute retirement plan. So this was a sequence of questions, generated their own bespoke mini retirement plan with a bespoke cash flow forecast in it, all just done, all automated, and driving people, capturing email addresses, driving people towards our books, our seminars, and our processes. For the Leaving a Legacy gang, the post-retirement people, we had the Leaving a Legacy lunch, same equivalent. We had the book. We had the 1-minute wealth protector, because they're focused on protecting the wealth that they've already created. For the entrepreneurs, we had the business planning breakfast. So again, opportunity to come in, learn about business, but bringing finance into it. We had the book, and we had the 1-minute wealth builder for those people that were wanting to focus on building wealth. So we knew specifically who our ideal clients were, and actually we dialed that much more further down, and I'm going to come on to that in a minute. But one of the things that I think is a really big, really important in today's world of marketing is this ability to learn on the job. Now, one of the books that I read recently that I enjoyed was Elise Downing's book, where she runs the whole circumference of the UK. And she does it on a complete whim. She's finished university, she gets a job, she's fed up with her boyfriend, she's fed up with her job, and she's like, I'm just going to go and do it. She sets off. When she sets off, she's got the tent because she needs to sleep in a tent somewhere, but she doesn't even try putting the tent up before she sets off. She's like never really run much before. It is the best book for learning, for seeing somebody learn on the job, and kind of basically, I mean, she didn't even put the tent up for something like 3 months because she just ended up staying in hotels or staying in people's houses because she just couldn't face it. She eventually did. But it's a really lovely book. But a great story in business that I liken this to is in Black Box Thinking by Matthew Syed. And he uses the example of Unilever. And Unilever is had a problem with developing, it was a nozzle as part of the washing powder development process. And this nozzle was creating a massive inefficiency in the process that was costing them a fortune in lost productivity. And the engineers had tried everything and couldn't fix this nozzle problem. And in an act of desperation, Unilever decided to give the problem to the biologists. Now, the biologists had no concept of what would make a good nozzle or a bad nozzle, but what they did understand was evolution. So they took the nozzle, they made 100 variations on it, and they tried them all. And then they picked the best one that they could find, and they made 100 variations on that, tried them all, 100 variations on that. And in 3 cycles of that, they managed to turn a nozzle that was ineffective and costing Unilever a fortune to a really effective nozzle without a clue as to how. They didn't understand why the nozzle was now good and it was bad, but evolution had taught them that. And the wonderful thing about marketing today is that we can do this really easily. I mean, if we'd said historically we were going to put an advert on ITV for our business, but no, we weren't going to just do one, we were going to do 3 different adverts and trial the results. I mean, that would just cost you the most ridiculous amount of money. And then once you learned which one was the best, you'd create 3 variations of that. Again, it cost you a fortune. We can now do that on Facebook nearly for free. I mean, you could do it for free, but it would be more effective if you pay a tiny amount. So this is what we can do with our marketing, is once we understand the ideal client, we can evolve our marketing really, really effectively by trying, because often what we find is if we do 3 versions of a particular piece of marketing, we'll go, well, look, this one's definitely the best. And yet, is it the best to us? Is it the best to the consumer that is our ideal client? And so what you might find is the best to us actually attracts the wrong clients, or not many clients. So if we can create 3 different variations, we can pick the best result, create 3 variations on that, pick the best result. And this is essentially what I'd started off by saying with Stephen Bartlett now doing with his podcast titles. No longer is he picking the best title that he thinks will work and that's it. He'll go out, test different titles in the early release. That's the one that's getting the most listeners. We're now using that title. And this is such a powerful thing when it comes to online marketing. And of course, with AI, we can use AI to give us more examples, create 3 variations based on this advert. We've got our variation, we can use AI to do the grunt work for us. And then we can use the systems within social media to manage it. So one more piece before we break for lunch, I think. So at Efficient Portfolio, and I want you to kind of think about this over lunch and discuss it. But we really tried to be very specific about who our ideal clients were, and to the point where, so firstly, we knew what car most of our clients drove, and the way that we could use that. So, for example, we knew that the majority of our clients drove Range Rovers. There was other top cars as well, the odd Aston Martin in there, but Range Rover was the predominant car. So we would speak to Range Rover Garage and go, well, look, could we do a co-hosted event? Because we now know that their clients are our clients and vice versa. It's good for them. It's good for us. We're not in competition with each other. We can do collaborative stuff. We know that the majority of our ideal clients were in and around Rutland or London. So we knew specific geographically where they need to be. We knew they have to be above a certain level of wealth. They might be the perfect fit geographically, but if they've got no money to invest, they're definitely not our ideal client. We knew that most commonly, not all of them, but most of our ideal clients played golf. So brands that they would associate themselves with were Titleist, and they would typically be a member of a golf club. The best golf club in Rutland is Luffenham Heath. So that again is a really great way of us identifying where our ideal clients hang out is at Luffenham Heath. And then finally, we actually knew that the majority of our ideal clients were male. So again, even though, and that's not us saying we only want male clients, but because of the age of our clients and because historically the guy has driven the financial planning of people of a certain age, we knew that was the client that we had to market to. Doesn't say that we shouldn't market to females, but it's saying that we know our marketing is going to be easier if we market to males. So we got really, really specific about what our ideal client looked like. And we're going to do an exercise after lunch. There's a bit more I want to cover on this before we do that exercise. But I think let's have a break now. Let's have lunch. And we'll maybe break for 45 minutes. I'm going to leave you guys that are online in the room, and I'm going to try and set up a mic so that you can hear everybody, but so that you can be a part of this conversation if you would like to be. Equally, I'm very conscious that Elka and Henry, you are staring at a screen, or like literally from, well, in the UK, 9 till 5, in Toronto, I have no idea what time. But four, is it 4? Did you start at 4, Elka?
Correct.
Bloody hell. That's commitment. Isn't that commitment? That's so I'm very conscious that, like, I don't want you to miss out on any sort of conversation as part of the group, but I equally think resting your eyes and looking at a screen for 45 minutes is probably a good idea.
We're going to do a combination. I'll listen in and then I'll make my kids lunches.
Perfect. Excellent. Good call. And you can have your breakfast rather than lunch. Brilliant. So let's break for some lunch and some food, hopefully all laid out in the meeting room. We'll come back and eat it in here, chat, and we'll aim to resume at 25 past 1 if you do want to just walk away from the screen and sort yourselves out. So 25 past 1, 45 minutes should be about right, hopefully. And then we'll carry on the ideal client piece. Thank you very much.
Bon appetit, everyone.
I will change the Right, I'm going to round up Jitesh. No, no worries. And I'm going to see if Alka and Henry are in the room. Henry's in the room. Which are you predominantly seeing? This one or this one?
I'm flitting around a little bit.
Okay.
Depending upon.
I'm slightly paranoid that the recording is from this one, and the recording is predominantly going to be of my arse rather than my face. Who knows? That's probably my better view, actually.
I'm not going to comment, but
I think that's better that you don't.
I think the main screen at the moment is it's just the TV screen being shown to me, rather than.
Sorry, say again.
The main screen I'm seeing at the moment is the TV screen rather than your backside.
Okay, good, excellent. That's probably my best view. Best angle, yeah, is the photo of Table Mountain.
Oh, it
right,
is, isn't it? And
let's
the
resume.
submerged church in Rutland Water.
Okay, so I just want to pick up where I left off, and there's a couple of bits I didn't mention here. So when we were narrowing down what our ideal clients were, and then thinking about how can we use that information to find more of those ideal clients, or at least kind of know what we're looking for. So I said about the Range Rover meeting garages. In terms of wealth, it might be that one way you screen for people when you're buying data, marketing on social media. It might be that you're looking at only homeowners, because it would know that sort of information. I said about one particular golf club or brand. So on social media, if somebody likes a particular brand, you can focus on advertising to those people. So that's quite a useful thing to know. In terms of our ideal clients, we knew that a good number of our ideal clients holidayed in South Africa. And so therefore, one of the ways that we used that was we wrote a blog on traveling around South Africa, so that if somebody Googled that, it was like, oh, here's a top tips on traveling around South Africa. Whether we got up to the top of Google on that is, but again, we're sending it out to our clients, and they're sending it out to other people. Anytime I'm chatting to somebody, it's like, oh, you're going to South Africa? Hang on, let me send you this guide. It's got restaurants, it's got places. So again, we know that. We know that, again, they typically read the Daily Telegraph. So again, we can use that in social media. Yeah, so when we were doing this Efficient Portfolio, we used an external digital marketing agency that would dial that down. Company called Hallam, based in Nottingham. They're a big company. Happy to recommend them. I'm not saying they're amazing, but they were good. But absolutely, it's about utilizing the information once you know it. And one of the other concepts that I think is really important when we're thinking about anything to do with marketing is understanding the value of a client to us. So Efficient Portfolio, we knew that our ideal client typically generated us £10,000 of fees in year one and £3,000 a year thereafter. And we very rarely lost clients, but let's assume a client for that purpose stayed for 5 years. So that's £25,000 per client. So if you know a client's worth £25,000 to you, how much would you spend on finding a client? You know, if you understand that that is the worth of a client, you can afford to spend a whole shed load more money. Equally, if a client's only worth 100 quid to you, you can't spend much more than 10 quid acquiring them, because you know. But if I said, here's a guaranteed way, your client is worth, let's say it's £10,000 a client value. If I said, here's a guaranteed way to generate you your ideal client, and it's going to cost £1,000 per pop, you'd be like, well, how much money can I borrow? As long as you've got the capability to take those clients on, you'd borrow as much money as you could to throw that at a guaranteed 10 times return on your money. So you've got to be really clear what is the value of a client, because only once you know that can you justify how much you spend on marketing. And I'll give you an example of this. of how we use this. So I've already said that Luffenham Heath was the best golf club in the area. We know that a lot of our ideal clients are members at golf clubs, so that's a great place for us to hang out. And one of the ways that we can do that, particularly to expand the people that we meet there, is not just be a member and play there, but we decided to sponsor the Pro-Am, because the Pro-Am is a mixture of existing members and people coming in as guests and playing. And we sponsor the Pro-Am. It costs us about, I think, to be the lead sponsor, it costs us about £3,000. But then we put together goodie bags so that we gave everybody that played that round a set of golf balls, nice tee and marker or whatever, golf ball marker and pitch mark repairer, and a copy of the Dream Retirement. Cost us all in probably about £8,000 to do that day. We picked up one Luffenham non-member as a client, so we know for a fact that that came in directly as a result of that. So that paid for all of that marketing, probably 2.5 times over, because he was a good client. But 50% of the people that played on that day were members at Luffenham, and we got a lot of clients from Luffenham. Now, whether they came as a result of the Pro-Am, whether the Pro-Am was part of that message that they picked up on, I mean, it was quite funny because we were sitting there at the dinner table, and one of the old boys, it was a guy that he sadly, I think he's passed away. I don't know, I might be wrong actually. But he owned the George at Stamford, a guy called Lawrence Hoskins. Lovely, lovely guy. Pardon? Yeah, I thought he had. Really lovely guy. And he was sitting at the table and he was like, honestly, sponsors, there's a book in this bloody bag. And I'm sat at the table and my dad sat there as well. And there was kind of like this kind of, we look between each other, it's like, where is he going? And you could see my dad going, I don't want Lawrence going down some rabbit hole here. And he's like, have you looked at whose book it is? And we ended up with this very funny moment. But ultimately, you know, that book then it was a great way of getting that book out to a whole load of the members. Some of them will have chucked it straight in the bin. Actually, very rarely do people throw books in the bin. Some of them will have looked at it and gone, I'll just keep the golf balls and I'll stick that on the bookshelf. But at some point in their life, they might go, I want to read that book. Or my mate is just coming up to retirement. Oh, I've got this book. Here we go. People generally don't throw those sorts of things away. Same with, like, golf balls are easily lost, as I know. But a nice pitch mark repairer, they'll carry that around time and again. So think about how you can use this in your world. And then I read an article that was about 7 different ways to identify your ideal client. And I think there were some useful bits in there. And there's some stuff that I'm going to get you to do around the exercise. But I've already talked about the fact that we know the gender of our ideal client. We knew the ideal client age brackets. We knew the location of them, and we knew their income level. But there's a whole load of other things that we might want to think about our ideal clients. And of course, our ideal clients might be companies. So then it's a question of, are we thinking about the business owner, or are we thinking about the business? And you might want to ask both of those sets of questions. You want to consider the current habits of your ideal client. So where do they hang out online? I know that our 55 to 65-year-olds are not hanging out on TikTok or Snapchat. Well, actually, I say that. Probably now I'm wrong. But yeah, I know. But yeah, okay, it's still frustrating, isn't it? But we know that if our ideal client was 20, Facebook is not the place that they hang out online. If they're 60, they probably still hang out online in Facebook. And then also, where do they hang out in real life? And that might be a business hangout. It might be a personal hangout. We want to think about, what are the common goals? And this is part of the exercise that I'm going to get you doing later on, is what are the common goals that these ideal clients have, and what are the common fears that they have? Because as soon as you know this stuff, you can market to them better. Take the Dream Retirement, how to protect your money and retire happy. So the common goal for those people is the Dream Retirement. I talked a lot about the title with my publisher, and we came up with a few different ideas, but the only way we could encapsulate the positive outcome was the term the Dream Retirement, because it's different for everyone, isn't it? some want a wealthy retirement, somebody want an exciting retirement. But then there's the negative of the fears of, actually, I'm going to blow it up. So then it's like, right, okay, how do you protect your money? So you've got to think about, if we know the common goals and the common fears of our ideal client, we can market so much better. And I'm going to get you doing some exercise around that. How do our ideal clients make buying decisions? Now, I knew that a genuine ideal client was the sort of person that could make decisions like that. One of the reasons why I love dealing with entrepreneurs, because they tended to be able to make decisions. Whereas there's nothing more frustrating than sitting there in front of what you think is maybe your ideal client. They've got all the right boxes ticked, they've got good wealth or whatever it is that is right for you, and yet they just dither and can't get on with it, can't make a decision. You're like, you just want to throttle them by the end of it, don't you? So you've got to understand but it might be that that's not the case for you. Your ideal clients might be different to that. Ask yourself, who do you actually want to work with? You know, we're ultimately here to enjoy, you know, it might be that a super wealthy client that, like, I'm fortunate enough to meet a couple of billionaires. I think they're not the nicest people I've ever met, but I concluded that actually a billionaire wasn't our ideal client for several reasons. But the type of person that it takes to become a billionaire was never the person that I wanted to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So that would be a good reason why it's not. And what do they like? And so what do they like? So you want to, what do they like and need? So kind of needs we've kind of talked about already, but there is a book that I've mentioned in prior workshops, but only sort of fleetingly. I don't know, has anyone read The Lean Startup? Yeah, so Lean Startup is a great book. Came out of, it's a very widely shared book in Silicon Valley. And the main concept of the Lean Startup is the minimum viable product. So when you're launching any new business, what is the bare minimum that you can get away with launching so that you can get it out there, you can trial it, and then you can work out which bits work, which bits don't work, which bits are important, and then you focus on those. Because let's say you're launching an app and you go, right, we've got this amazing app, and we've got these 10 things that we think everyone needs in this app. It might be you spend so long making all 10 work to find out that actually your ideal client only wanted 5 of them, 5 remain unused. And then, so you've wasted half your time. But if you've got a minimum viable product out there, you'd know to spend your time improving those 5 and making those world class, as opposed to spending time developing 5 that were no longer needed. Same applies in business. There's a great business marketing book. Same applies in marketing. Great book by Seth Godin's got a few good books out in the marketing space. Tribes is another good book of his. But This Is Marketing is a really interesting book in terms of talking about what is your minimum viable niche. How can you really boil that niche down so that you are marketing very specifically to your ideal client? Because the smaller the niche you get, the more you can become compelling. And one of the other really great advantages of this is that you end up building a tribe. So when we had a golf day, efficient portfolio golf day, or pub quiz night, guess what? Because of the profiling I've just shown you, that we were going out and target, doesn't mean that if somebody came to us and they read the Sun rather than the Telegraph, we were like, no, you shall not be our client. Of course not. But when we know what we're looking for and we're specifically targeting those people, we end up creating a tribe of very similar like-minded people, which means that they actually enjoy being a part of that tribe. So you might want to also think about, when it comes to this, how can you actually bring that tribe together? Because I found that every time we brought clients together, whether it was over dinner, whether it was over a golf day, whether it was over the pub quiz, I particularly loved the golf day and the pub quiz because they're the best things that I found where there was a really good reason for them to invite somebody I didn't know. So with golf, it's like, right, bring a partner. That means 50% of the people at the golf day are potential clients. Occasionally they'll bring their son and you're like, well, that's no bloody good, is it? But that's fine, that's their prerogative. And again, pub quiz, they're bringing people that aren't clients and that are now seeing the tribe. So it's really powerful.